What's up, family? This is your boy Ivan Hall, the Credit King. Do you want to have good credit? If so, then you need to have good primary trade lines. What are primary trade lines, you ask? A primary trade line is a credit account that is opened in your own name, in which the creditor extends credit to you as the borrower. When you open up a credit card on your own, you have a primary trade line. This means that you are responsible for the transactions that occur on this trade line. Mortgages, auto loans, and credit card accounts under your name are all examples of common primary trade lines. As you can see, you're probably already familiar with primary trade lines. They're the most common type of trade line out there. Chances are, you already have a primary trade line in your own name. The best way to add primary trade lines to your credit report is to open accounts in your own name and keep them in good standing by always paying on time and keeping the utilization low. Examples of primary trade lines to apply for include credit cards, auto loans, home loans, or any line of credit on which you are the primary account holder. This is a foundational step in building a balanced mix of credit. With an authorized user, AU, Tradeline, you are added as an authorized user to someone else's account, which means you are not responsible for charges made, but the account can still be added to your credit report. In contrast, you are responsible for the charges on your own primary accounts. Since you are the one on the hook for the debt, primary accounts are often seen as a better indication of how financially responsible you really are. This is why it's important to have some primary trade lines in your credit file as part of your foundation for good credit. It is also why some believe that primary trade lines are superior to AU trade lines. However, when it comes to buying trade lines, AU trade lines are still very powerful tools, while buying primary trade lines is unfortunately often associated with scams and fraud. It is usually best to get free primary trade lines by opening them yourself rather than trying to purchase them. You can acquire primary trade lines for free by opening a credit card or another type of account. There may be a few instances in which people can legitimately purchase primary trade lines, but probably not many. It's just common sense. If a primary trade line is an account opened in your name, of which you are the primary user, how could you buy one that already exists? How would that account have been created? Someone else had to have opened that account in their name at some point. So how does it become your primary trade line? People often assume that primary trade lines are better than authorized user trade lines because they are in your own name and indicate more financial responsibility. However, in the case of buying trade lines, that is often not the case. According to FICO, revolving debts, for example credit cards, are weighted more heavily than installment debts, for example auto loans, mortgages. The reason for this is that while installment debt is often secured by collateral, such as your car in the case of an auto loan, revolving debt is typically unsecured, which makes it riskier for the lender. Therefore, revolving debt is a better indication of one's credit risk, which is why it affects your credit score so much. In addition, the credit utilization part of your credit score, which makes up 30%, only factors in revolving accounts, so adding an installment loan would not help your utilization ratio. When it comes to buying trade lines, then, it makes sense to go for revolving accounts rather than installment accounts. When you buy authorized user trade lines, these are always going to be revolving accounts since they are authorized user positions on credit cards. Since they are revolving accounts, they can help with utilization. If you really wanted to buy a primary revolving account, though, how exactly could that be done? You might wonder if you could just pay to have someone else's credit card account transferred to your name, but it's not possible to do that since the lender issued the credit to the primary user and not you. When buying primary trade lines, it is probably more likely to be an installment debt such as an auto loan, which is not as impactful to credit scores, and you cannot legitimately show any payment history since this was not your account. When it comes to buying authorized user trade lines versus primary trade lines, we believe it is actually better to buy AU trade lines for several reasons. First is the power of AU trade lines. Due to ECO and Regulation B, the credit bureaus are forced to consider authorized user positions on credit cards, largely because the banks do not distinguish whether an AU is a spouse or not. Therefore, if the credit bureaus weigh an AU position relatively close to the primary position, then a primary position is not much more valuable than an AU position. Second, primary trade lines for sale are usually going to be some form of an installment loan, and those are not as powerful as revolving accounts, meaning an AU revolving account is more powerful than a primary installment loan. Then there are the myriad of other reasons that make buying primary trade lines risky or less desirable. For example, primary trade lines cannot legitimately come with any payment history, so it will either appear not seasoned or you are probably engaging in some sort of fraud. Legitimate revolving primaries often involve getting lines of credit at jewelry stores, for example, but the credit limits are low and there is no age to them, and age is the most important factor in a trade line. Most of the other methods mentioned above are often associated with fraud, which of course you want to avoid. You are trying to play the credit game, but it is important to stay within the legal lines. When considering purchasing a primary trade line versus an authorized user trade line, there is a big difference on what you are saying. In the authorized user case, there is no lie. You have legitimately been added as an authorized user on that account. On the other hand, often when buying seasoned primary accounts, you know it is not really your account. Therefore, saying the account belongs to you is fraudulent. In contrast, the authorized user account is not claimed to be primarily your account. You are simply an authorized user, which is a verifiable fact, and no laws prevent you from having the right to be an authorized user. Now that you know, go get that money.